This section is on percent of change. Two vocabulary words that you need to know are percent of increase and percent of decrease. Percent of increase is when a new number is greater than the original number. Percent of decrease is when the new number is less than the original number. So the first two examples from the notes given to you are to determine whether or not it was a percent of increase or decrease, and actually find the percent of change. Okay, so the first one it gives us is the original is 32, and I'm going to represent that as O. And it says the new number is 40. Okay, we can go ahead and look at this and tell that our original was 32 and the new number was 40. So we should be able to determine that this is a percent of increase. So it is a percent of increase. Now we have to actually determine the percent of change. So to do that, there's a formula that you use. You subtract the two values and then you divide it by the original number, and then you'll get a decimal. And then with that decimal, you then multiply it by 100 or move the place over 2 to the right, and then that'll give you your percent. So we're going to plug it into the formula where we subtract the two numbers. And it doesn't matter the order because we've already determined that it was percent of increase. And then we're going to divide by the original number, which in this case was 32. When you divide these, you get 0.25. And as I already mentioned, we move your decimal place over 2 to get it to 2%. Or you can also take it and multiply it by 100. Both ways are just going to give you 25%. So 25% is part of our answer, as is the percent of increase. The next example is the same type of process. So we're going to take the original and the new and subtract them. So we're going to take 20, subtract 4, divide by the original, which was 20. So you get 16 over 20, which is this, all completed is 0.8. So 0.80, then changed into a percent, is 8%. And then our original is greater than our new, meaning it was a percent of decrease. All right, the next three examples deal with sales tax and talking about percents of increasing the amount of money when selling something. So the next example reads, the sale price of an unused bookstore pays to buy a book is $5. The store then sells the book for 28% above the price that it pays for the book. I wrote plus 28% because that means it's above, it's greater than, it's percent of increase. And it wants to know what the price of the book is, the price of the $5 book. So what did they end up selling the book for? Basically, for these types of problems, you just have to multiply, and then whatever you get, you're going to add back to the original number. So we're going to take the $5 book, and we're going to multiply it by our percent of increase. Whenever you multiply, make sure you change everything to a decimal, your percents. So you get 25 times 0.28, which gives you 140. And that's a dollar amount. So because this is a percent of increase, then we're going to take the 140, we're going to add it back to the original price. And that should give us the amount of money that the store sold the book for, which was $6.40. Okay, so then the next one talks about tax, and everyone's familiar with tax, so this one shouldn't be as difficult. It says the meal cost for 2 people to go out to eat was $32.75. The tax on that meal is 5%. We want to know the total price of the meal. Well, everyone knows that when you deal with tax, you have to add the tax amount to the sub-cost. So that's what we're going to end up doing. We're going to do the same process that we did before. So we're going to take the $32.75 and multiply it by the 5% decimal, which is 0.05. When you do that, you get kind of a long decimal, 1.6375. So as we already know, tax is something where you have to add it back. So we're going to add that back to the original. And when you do that, you get 34.39. A little trick whenever you're doing taxes, because you do know that you have to add it back. And I'm going to show you a shortcut for finding the total cost for an amount that's taxed. You take the original amount, and instead of multiplying it by our percent of increase, we're going to multiply it by 100% of the, or 1.05 in this case. The 1 represents that it's already been added back, so it should end up with our final cost. So whenever you multiply these two together, you actually get the 34.39. Which, if you know, is the same exact answer. So either way will work for taxes, only if it wants the final price. If it wants to know how much is being taxed, then that's the 1.6375. But if it wants to know the final cost, then that's the 34.39, where you can multiply by 1 and the decimal. The last example talks about discounted price. And we know when we get discounted, whenever we go shopping, we're taking it away from the original price. So in this case, instead of adding, we're going to actually subtract. So this last one says the dog toy is on sale for 20% off the original price. The original price of the toy is $3.80. What is the discounted price? $3.80 is how much our toy costs, and it gets 20% off. Okay, we can do it the same way we just did it, without the 1. The 1 only works for taxes. There is a shortcut for this one, which I'll show after I show you the real way to work this out. So we're going to take the 380 and multiply it by the 20%. Make sure we change all of our percents to decimals. And when you do this, you get 0.76, which tells us how much money we're going to take off of the original price. So we then subtract this from the original. And when you subtract that, you get 304. A trick for doing these types of problems when you're talking about percent and you want to find the final price of a percent. It's just like with the taxes, we added a 1 in front. Well, the same type of process. You're going to take 100% of the item and you're going to actually subtract the 20% to figure out how much is left, how much you're actually paying on the item. So when you do that, and that should make sense. 100% of the item cost is the $380. We're going to subtract 20% of that, and you're left with 80% of the item. So you are paying on 80% of the item. So you can actually take the 80% and multiply that by the original. And when you do that, you actually get the price that you're going to pay for it, which is $3.04. And again, those are the exact same amounts. So shortcuts for this example, when we're talking about discounts and things like that, and the same type of shortcut for when you're talking about taxes. So keep the shortcuts in mind, but always make sure that you know when to use them, because sometimes, depending on the wording of the problem, you may not be able to use the discounted price or the shortcuts when trying to find the answers to these problems.